We talk endlessly about love. We write songs about it. Religions preach it, argue about it, and entire lives are organized around it. But we almost never ask a simple question. What do we actually mean when we say the word love? And a more uncomfortable question, which is, who in me is loving? Is it the ego? Is it a wound? It is the fear of loneliness? What is it? The need for validation? Is it something that comes from someone who has actually started to know themselves? Because the ancient Greeks didn't understand agape, love, the way we do today. They were asking a much harder question. Can love become intelligent? This video isn't about whether love is good or bad. It is about whether what we call love is even love at all, and whether love can evolve from an emotion into an understanding. Last month, two different viewers asked me almost the same thing. One wrote, what was it? Any meanings to agape you can share. And another wrote, I've had success using unconditional acceptance as the meaning of agape, but please share if there are other ancient meanings. So I thought to myself, all right, it is time to make this video about agape. But the more I sat with it, I started thinking of something else. Why are people so fascinated with love, with agape? Why does agape keeps coming back again and again and again? And the deeper question underneath this is that when people talk about love, are they actually talking about the same thing? Or do they just have the impression that they are talking about the same thing? Because if we ask 100 people what is love, we will get 100 different answers. Love is acceptance, love is sacrifice, love is romance, love is compassion, love is forgiveness, love is kindness, love is attachment, love is desire, love is happiness, love is God, and love is an unconditional acceptance. Everyone reaches for the same word, but are we actually talking about the same thing? I don't think we are. And that takes us straight to Heraclitus. The common logos of Heraclitus. Heraclitus says, although the logos is common, most people live as though they possess a private understanding. So Heraclitus here talks about human consciousness. The logos is common, reality is common, truth is common, the very order of existence is common, but most people walk around the planet as if each of them owns their own little private reality, their own little truth, their own little wisdom, their own little way of reading existence. So maybe love works the same way. Everyone is using the same word, love, but everyone might mean something completely different by it. One person might mean biological attraction, another one might mean something emotional, another one is using the word to cover some kind of fear of loneliness, another one means sacrifice or attachment or acceptance or the desire to be understood or even God. We have the same word, but maybe everyone is actually living their own little world inside this world, inside this word when they use the word. As Heraclitus puts it, people live with an idea phronesis, a private understanding. So maybe they also carry a private definition of love. And this is where we hear this phrase all the time now, my truth. You hear people say, there's no such thing as objective truth, and they will bring you 3,000 examples to prove it. Someone considers something sacred, another person considers the exact same thing forbidden. What's virtue in one place, it is shame in another country, for example. What is justice here is injustice there. And the argument sounds convincing on the surface because they say, look, if truth was really common, everyone would agree on it. Since no one agrees, truth must be a private thing. Truth must be relative. Everyone gets their own. But think about this process. Think about what that actually takes. If every human being everywhere can sit down and start sorting right from wrong, good from bad, something has to already be there giving them this ability to do that in the first place. And something else, the ability to sit with it afterward, to be bothered by it, to keep asking whether they got it right or wrong. That restlessness, that constant double checking, that's already the logos doing its work in them. And this is actually where the word analogy comes from. Analogia, proportion, ratio. It is a word built straight out of logos, analogia. Now, whether the analogia you are using, the way you weigh one thing against another to decide what's just or unjust, sacred or profane or whatever is right or wrong, isn't something you can just decide on the spot. You have to come to see it slowly by trying to study one specific relationship. What moves next to what doesn't move. That's where this relation is actually born. That is where things start having depth, dimension, not something that comes from opinion, but from watching the moving thing against the still one. And that's what lets you actually start seeing objective truth instead of just having an opinion about it. This is actually why in the Cratylus Socrates takes apart the word Dikaion, justice, and finds the ion inside it, which means that which passes through all things, and also the Akaion, that which burns through all things. Justice isn't a rule sitting somewhere. It is something that moves, something that passes through everything and touches everything, because it is tracking that exact same relationship, the moving against the unmoving, all the way down. And that's really the deeper point underneath all this. The universe runs on logic and on mathematics, on ratio, whether we personally understand it or not. Everything moves, and we move too. And we move mentally, we move physically, usually both at once. Every kind of motion produces its own analogies and its own sequences. And this brings another question. What sequences are we actually creating? What do they do to everything around us once they are set in motion? Are they creative or are they destructive? And that's not random at all. It depends entirely on how well we actually understand the very nature of motion itself. That is the logos Heraclitus is pointing to. Not a rule book that every culture happens to agree on. Customs were never going to agree, and he knew that. The logos is the common ground between the very disagreement itself. The order that makes judging, distinguishing, and reasoning possible in the first place, everywhere, for everyone. Even while what people conclude looks completely different from place to place. You see what I mean? And that brings another question, which is quite uncomfortable. Who is it that loves? That might sound like a strange question, but philosophy usually starts with strange questions. Who is it that says I love you? Is it the conscious self? Is it the ego? A frightened child inside you? An abandoned part of you? The need for validation? The fear of death? The fear of loneliness? The biological instinct? A social mask? A wounded psyche? Or what we said before, or someone who has actually started to know themselves? Because if I don't know myself, how could I possibly know what in me is doing the actual loving, or even what I mean when I say the word? This is why I think that the Delphic maxim, know thyself, isn't separate from the very question of love. It might actually be it's precondition. Without self-knowledge, love turns into a projection almost automatically. I project my needs onto another person, my fears, my desires, my fantasies, my idea of salvation, and then I call this love. But maybe I haven't loved at all. Maybe I have just desired, maybe I have just attached, or maybe I have just projected. The Greeks didn't have one word for love. The ancient Greeks understood something we have mostly forgotten. Human relationships are way too complex to be squeezed in a single concept. So they distinguished Eros, Philia, Storge, Agape, Agapesis. Each one describes a different movement of the soul, a different relationship to reality, and a different mode of being. Eros is longing, desire, movement toward what is absent, the search for something we feel we lack. And Plato presents Eros as the child of poverty and resourcefulness. Eros seeks, Eros desires, and Eros becomes. I actually made a video about Eros on its own. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it after this one. Because today we just touched briefly in this video about Agape. Storge is natural affection. It is tenderness from the parents, attachment, familiarity, a feeling of emotional closeness. Think of the deep sense of care and protection that a mother has for her child. That's the clearest example of it. It's not chosen, it is not earned, it is just there and almost built into the very relationship, into the very bond. Philia is friendship, mutual recognition, shared virtue, and Aristotle famously said that a friend is another self, the ideal friend. Philia already demands something more conscious, something that is more stable and more deliberate than a mere feeling. And this is exactly where discernment comes in. You are actually choosing what to keep, what to let go, what actually does something good for me, and what doesn't. That's already a form of judgment, of sorting out. You're not just drawn to someone the way you would be drawn to a stranger or something. You are recognizing something in them that it is worth keeping close. Philotes is something that is totally forgotten. For Empedocles, is a cosmic principle. It is a form of union, a principle of harmony, a power that is capable of pulling multiplicity into coherence. It is no longer simply an emotion. It is an ordering principle. It is a movement toward unity, and carries the same discernment we just talked about with Philia. It is actually the same root. It is the same word. But here, the discernment isn't happening between two people anymore. It is moved somewhere else. On one side, it becomes a state of existence, an ontology, a way of being and not a way of relating. On the other side, it becomes a cosmological principle, the force that holds the whole universe together instead of just holding two people together. This is what Philotes is. And of course, it is also a virtue in its own right. It is the virtue of Philotes. It's basically the state a philosopher lives in. That's what it actually is at the very bottom of the word. It is the state of consciousness of a philosopher. Agape as pathos. Now we get to agape, love, and this is where it gets interesting. Today, the moment we hear agape or love, we think maybe of unconditional love, of universal acceptance, of tolerance, of compassion, of forgiveness. But that's not where the Greek word actually starts. If we go to the old Greek dictionaries, we get a different story. The dictionary of Stamatakos basically defines agape as a psychological inclination, an affinity, a movement of the soul, an emotional pull, and an inner leaning towards something, which means something very important. Agape belongs first and foremost to pathos. And for the Greeks, pathos just means whatever the soul goes through, an emotional stirring. It is a state where consciousness gets affected by something. So, agape starts as a feeling, as a pathos, as a sentiment. None of the philosophical schools, none of them, the Platonists, the Stoics, the Aristotelians, the Epicureans, no one put agape at the center of their thinking. And this is not an accident. Agape belongs to the passions, and philosophy cares about something else, educating the passions and transforming them, and transforming the person carrying them into something more. When love turns into hatred. And here is something that we have to face honestly here. An intelligent love doesn't stay small or stay imperfect and a passion. It can turn into the exact opposite. And that is the part that nobody wants to talk about. Someone loved so much and ended up killing. Someone loved so much in the name of love and in the name of God and committed atrocities. Someone loved so much that they turned the life of the person they loved into hell. How does that happen? It happens because love that never passes through self-knowledge isn't actually loving the other person at all. It is loving itself through the other person. So the other person becomes what? Becomes a vessel for my need, a mirror for the image that I have created in my head. And it's a proof that I'm not alone doing this. I have support from the others, but it's only in my head. That isn't agape. That is self-love wearing the mask of love. And the problem with self-love is simple. The moment the other person refuses to keep playing this game, the role of the vessel, when they leave, when they disagree, when they simply want to exist as a separate being within their own will, the same energy that was called love turns into hate. And what is being lost there? It isn't the other person. What is being lost here is my own reflection inside them. Nobody kills because they lost a person. They kill because they lost themselves inside that person. Plato describes this with total precision in the Republic through the tyrannical man. It is a soul ruled by one single overgrown desire that has enslaved reason itself. And this desire tolerates no obstacle. It will do anything, even murder, to protect what? Itself, or satisfy itself. This isn't a symptom of love failing. This is what happens when love stays at the level of pathos and never becomes understanding. And this is exactly where Empedocles fits back in. Philotes and Nikos aren't two separate forces sitting in two separate realms, they are two poles of the same cosmic motion. Union pushed to its extreme doesn't stay union, it becomes swallowing the other part, a refusal of their otherness. And that refusal is already Nikos, already fractured, even while it is still speaking the language of love. I love you so much, I cannot bear for you to exist without me. This isn't an excess of love, it is Nikos wearing the mask of Philotes. And the same mechanism is exactly what drives atrocities committed in the name of God's love. It isn't love overflowing its own banks, it is a need for control and certainty that has borrowed the name of love because love sounds sacred. Without self-knowledge, nobody can really talk about love, apart from something that will be fear, hatred, playing malice, a cover-up, a need, all dressed in its clothes, in the clothes of Agape, in the clothes of love. Agapesis. Here is a word that it is almost completely forgotten. No one knows this word, Agapesis. It is a word from the Platonic school. As far as we know, it shows up in Spevsipos' dictionary and around the Platonic school. And what's happening here? Agapesis, is not referring to a feeling anymore. And you can actually start seeing the difference sitting inside the word itself, because the ending is of the word, agapesis, isn't a decoration. It marks an activity, an action, a process that is actually happening, or the result that comes out of it. It is the same ending you see in pieces, the actual making of something, or praxis, the actual doing of something. So, where agape sits in the passive voice, a pull, an inclination, something that happens to you, agapesis is something active. It is not a feeling that you are having. It is something you are doing. And it asks you something much harder: knowledge, self-knowledge, discernment, and real understanding. Understanding yourself, understanding human consciousness, understanding how reality actually works, and understanding that people are operating on completely different levels at the same time. Some people are acting from wisdom, others from ignorance, others from trauma, others from fear, others from a deeper kind of awareness. And once you actually get that, you stop being at war with reality. This is at its core everything we've been talking about in this video and on this channel in general. This is not unconditional acceptance. It is not moral relativism. It is not saying everything is equally good, equally just equally true. No. The discernment stays completely intact. You still tell the difference between the just and the unjust, of wisdom and ignorance, of truth and falsehood, of higher and lower states of consciousness. You just no longer hate reality because those differences exist. You understand it instead, and understanding is what transforms love, agape, to agapesis. Ago to pan, leading the whole. The old Eastern Roman Empire Byzantine dictionary, the Etymologikon Mega, gives us a great definition of agape. Ago to pan, leading the whole. No one actually knows who wrote this dictionary. The author is anonymous. But if you know your Platonic philosophy, you can tell exactly where this comes from. Now, his etymology, I wouldn't call it a historical etymology, it is a philosophical etymology. And what matters is what it's pointing at. What does it mean to hold or lead the whole? It means to carry all of it inside your consciousness at once. Truth and falsehood, joy and suffering, wisdom and ignorance, beauty and ugliness, order and chaos, all at the same time. And this is where I'm going to put my little contribution to this. Maybe that's exactly what is hiding inside Agapesis. It is what we would call today intelligent love. A love that has been educated by knowledge, a love that is connected to discernment, a love that can actually see reality in its full mess and complexity and can hold all of it without collapsing into hatred. A love that is actually plugged into the common logos, and this is probably exactly why the Greeks didn't reach for agape here, the way we throw the word around today. Love this, love that, love everything. You know what I mean? The Greeks used Philotes instead. Remember the word we already looked at? The one that stopped being a feeling between two people and became an ontology, a cosmic principle, the actual virtue a philosopher lives inside of. When love gets educated, when it becomes intelligent, it stops needing the word agape at all. It graduates into Philotes, because this is where Heraclitus is pointing. The logos is common, reality is common, truth is common, and only when you start participating consciously in that common order can love stop being a private sentiment and become something more. It becomes understanding, it becomes intelligent, and it becomes capable of holding the whole. Maybe the biggest misunderstanding of our age is mistaking love for indiscriminate acceptance. The Greek tradition points somewhere far more demanding than that. And here's probably the reason we ended up here. Agape is an easy word. It hits straight at the emotion, at the gut, without asking anyone to actually think first. Eros needed Plato to unpack it. Philia needed Aristotle. Philotes needed Empedocles and an entire cosmology behind it. Agape needed nobody. Anyone can feel it, nobody has to understand it at all. That's exactly why it's the one that spread everywhere and the one that ended up carrying all our assumptions about what love is supposed to mean. Love starts as pathos, as an emotional inclination, as a sentiment, but then it doesn't have to stay there. Through self-knowledge, through discernment, through understanding, through participation in the common logos, love can become something else. It can become agapesis, intelligent love, grounded in understanding. We are talking here about the ability to see reality in all its multiplicity and still remain open to it. This is probably why the Delphic know thyself and the question of love cannot really be separated. Without self-knowledge, we can talk about love forever and never find out what in us is actually doing the loving. So maybe the real question isn't, do I love? It is, who in me loves? Only once that question is honestly faced does the other possibility open up. What opens up? A love that understands, a love that can discern, a love that can hold the whole. So that's why they were using the word Philotes and not love. And also in the Platonic school, the word Agapesis. Love is love. There's a slogan, almost sacred in our time. Love is love. If a Greek philosopher heard that, he would probably ask, what do you mean by love? Are you going to be more specific? Eros, Philia, Philotes, Storge, Agape, Agapesis? Because if all of these radically different experiences just get filled under one word, then love is love doesn't actually explain anything. It just repeats the same word twice. It is a bit like saying truth is truth, or reality is reality. Philosophy always demands more than that. It demands distinctions, definitions, discernment, and above all, self-knowledge. Because the deeper question was never, is love love? It is, who is it that loves? The ego, the wound, the fear of loneliness, a need of validation? Is that desire? It is a biological instinct, a social mask? What is it? Is it me knowing myself and trying to understand more about myself? If I don't know myself, I cannot know what in me is loving. And maybe I call this attachment love. Maybe I call dependency love. Maybe I call desire love, or projection, or the fear of being alone. So the Greeks would probably ask us to hold our horses, pause, observe, know ourselves, and only then ask what this thing we call love actually is. Love may begin as pathos, but its highest possibility is something else entirely. A love educated by knowledge, by discernment, and by participation in the common logos. A love that is capable of understanding the whole, capable of holding reality together without going blind to its distinctions. A love that can cut through justice itself, the same way that Dikaion does. Dikaion, as we said, passing through all things, and Dikaion burning through all things. So the most important thing is justice. This is why the journey of love and know thyself cannot be pulled apart. Without know thyself, we can talk about love forever and never know what in us is actually loving. And this is not justice. And that is the final irony. Everyone says love is love. The Greeks would have answered, love is love. First tell me what you mean by love, then tell me who in you is loving. Only then does the philosophy actually begin.